Greetings. Welcome to my live. Let me first check and see if my mods are here. If you're one of my mods, can you identify yourself in the chat? And everyone else, let me know where you are streaming from. What city, village, borough, country. We want to know who's in this community. Got St. Pete, Florida here. This person said, looking, where are you? Uh-oh. Nizali Moon, looking forward to the Vesti Roundup. We got Portland, St. Pete, Portland, Maryland. Portland, Maine. And I guess the other Portland might be Oregon. Toulouse, France. I used to live in France. Sholo. I am very familiar with Sholo. Southern Massachusetts. I went to school in Western Mass. Jefferson, Georgia. Norman, Oklahoma. Have I been to Norman? I've been to Oklahoma, but I don't know if I've been to Norman. Belmar, New Jersey. One of my closest friends from high school lives in New Jersey. Albuquerque, Northern Virginia, Northeast Florida. I used to live in Central Florida. Wilmington, Delaware. Portland. I raise you, Portland, Oregon. Hello from Minnesota. Mighty Minis in the house. They're still fighting the good fight over there. Saugerties, New York, San Diego, Oceanside, San Diego. New York, Brooklyn. I spent a summer in Brooklyn. What was that neighborhood? I forget the neighborhood, but it was the gay neighborhood. What's that one called? It was awesome. Something Heights, maybe? I don't know. Washington Heights? I'm not sure. Vermont, Pasadena. My god sister lives in Pasadena. Uruguay. Sister Uruguay. Burbs of Chi-Town. I went to school in Winnetka. You might be familiar with that. Michigan. Spent my summers in Michigan. We got Middle Peninsula of Virginia. More minis from Minnesota. Rochester. All right, let me see if my mods are here. Got Alberta, Canada. Welcome, Sister Alberta. I did some talks in Alberta at the University of Alberta. Is that right? I might have the name wrong. It was a while ago. Ontario, Canada's in the house. Ottawa, a lot of Canadians in the house. New Hampshire. That was Crown Heights. Someone said that was Crown Heights, the gay neighborhood. It was awesome. Okay, are my mods here? I want to shout out to my mods. We got 207 in the room. It's early days. It's only 2 minutes in. But if you're a mod, let me know. I always have great mods. Oh, Seattle's here. I used to live in Seattle. I was a professor at Seattle U. McKinney, Texas. Owl, old wise lesbian in the house. We got an Angelino here, my neighbor. All right, welcome everybody. So today, what are we going to talk about today? What did I say we were going to talk about? This is our Thursday chill, chit chat about this and that. I go live most Thursdays to talk about the current, political situation, tell you what my guides are saying, give you my take on the big picture, and a little bit of Metatron, not the news thrown in, a little bit of comedy. And then what I've started doing as of last week is doing live readings of political questions. So not personal questions, but live readings of political and spiritual questions. And I was just thinking about it this week, how I answered some questions last week, but I don't remember the answers. And then I was wanting to know this week, well, what's the answer to that question? I'm gonna have to go back and watch. Because when I'm actually in a reading, getting information, it's a different part of the brain, right? It's like, I'm not necessarily paying attention. What does that mean? Happy day, a la 23. Oops. Is that because today is the day? So today is the day that Epistemic, right, that male physical therapist, made the prediction that it was going to happen. And so a lot of people are just like waiting, right? Is today the day? Is today the big day? And I thought it was funny because it's been all of us, mostly women, who've been doing predictions, right? Who are actually out here as psychics, taking a risk and predicting things and, having people, whatever, laugh at us and question us. And now we're seeing like guys like this who's not a psychic, but he's still making predictions. And I just think that's awesome because it's a sign of the shift, right? It's a sign of the rise of the divine feminine. It's a sign of the shift that there's just more and more people who are accepting the power of intuition and, different psychic abilities are now taken more seriously than they used to. At least that's what I think. And so let's talk about what's going on. I did a couple posts today about what's going on. And so let's talk a little bit about the conflict. And I'm gonna answer your questions. Paula, who I'm guessing is a psychic, said he will learn not to be so specific. Charlie said, we got 5 hours to go. So this could still be the day. Yep. Jezebel, day's not over. I didn't say it was over. I didn't say we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. Keep hope alive. So people are already asking questions. Yeah, it is a magic number, right? 23rd. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on. Let's talk about the Gulf. So, what do we hear about today? I already talked about this in my Metatron, not the news. But in case you didn't catch that, we had they're reporting that over 700 service members have either resigned or demanded a transfer, an urgent transfer out of the Gulf. And also we had the Secretary of the Navy, that's the top officer in the Navy, resign and or get fired. So first the news came out that he resigned, and then I think the circus tried to say they fired him. I think they're just trying to get ahead of things. I think they're just trying to, control the narrative. Because even the ones that have been fired because they refuse to follow the orders that are nonsensical, right? And so whether we say he was fired or he quit, we know why, right? We know why. And recall last week, for a couple of weeks now, I've been sharing a vision that I had that my guide showed me of all of these service members who are in the Gulf, kind of on standby, like they're about to start some big campaign, some sneak attack. And I've been seeing this for a couple of weeks, and I saw it again last week. And I think that's why so many people are resigning and or being fired because they won't follow orders, is because it's a ridiculous plan, right? It's an unwinnable war. It's a ridiculous plan. And so it's not a good idea. It's sacrifice is what it is. It's just the sacrifice of people. And so we're seeing that play out some more, right? Because, Head Clown decided to extend the fire of cease without being asked. Nobody asked him to do that. He said there were going to be more talks. Persia's like, we're not coming to any talks. And so if they had no leverage, right, they would have to go to talks. If they had no leverage, they would have some say. They would they'd be doing whatever they could to stop the ceasefire from ending, right? So what happens? Head Clown extends it by 2 weeks. Nobody asked him to, right? So He did that because they have no leverage, and his plan to go in and have a surprise attack, it's not working out for him. And so this is good. This is good. And it's good because of what my guides. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That little ding. Let me turn off the ding. It's because of what my guides said, right? They said that all right. They said that the bigger picture is that we need to see, right, the nature of the world. We need to see what the power structure looks like. We need to see what the economic structure looks like. We need to see who's in charge of what. And right now we're all in this wake up period where we're becoming aware of oil and the petrodollar and global currencies and how it's all connected. That's what we're learning right now. We're in this really awful school, one that we don't remember enrolling in. And we would like refunds, but no one's giving us any. And like once we enrolled in this school, they locked the door so we can't leave. And now we're just learning stuff in rapid fire. Like it's an intensive course where they just keep showing us videos every day and making us read books we don't want to read. And we're just being forced to learn about the true nature of our planet and how things are done. And we're learning it, the hard way. And so that's what's going on over there in Persia. So let me take some questions. Did I go into any other news? I covered a lot of news in my earlier post. The SAVE Act was defeated again, and we had that great win in Virginia. And of course, they're already trying to overturn it because they don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in the rule of law, right? Okay, so let me take your questions. Echo Soul Art says, I want to change my major. Don't we all? All right, here's a question. Let's start with a really crazy, let's start with a question about a really intense conspiracy theory. Here's the funny thing about the phrase conspiracy theory. This year, we have discovered that many of the conspiracy theories are true, right? Pizzagate was a conspiracy theory that the red hats started, supposedly about the blue hats. It turns out that the files are all about Pizzagate. They actually did use pizza as a code word and involved children, and right? We got a lot of information this year about UFOs and UAPs that have revealed that, a lot of the so-called conspiracy theories about that were true. So we don't even know what to do with that phrase anymore, right? Conspiracy theory. Like now we kind of, anytime we see something that's called a conspiracy theory, we kind of look at it sideways like, oh, that's probably true too, because that's the track record. I mean, it's hard for us, I think, at this point, even to evaluate things critically because so many crazy things have turned out to be true. All right. So here's the question. What is your opinion about the Illuminati ET, the lizard people that, according to some psychics, control our government and the world? So I'm not going to answer these questions based on what I already know. I'm going to answer them just by tuning into the question right now and seeing if I get something new right now about this question. And then I'm going to probably combine it with what I already know. Yeah. So it's true. Just there is an element of truth in this idea. And that is because there are certain people who are under the control of beings from other places. And But it's not true that like everything is controlled by some group of lizard people. At least that's what I'm getting, right? This is what I'm getting. Now, I did go to an event called Contact in the Desert years ago, and David Wilcox was there, and I know he just passed, and someone was asking about him. And what I picked up, in that conference was that there were certain people, and I think he was one of them, who were really attached to this binary of good versus dark, good versus light versus dark, good versus bad. They had this kind of binary. And they were talking a lot about this, like government being controlled by these lizard people. And intuitively, clairsentiently, when I was responding to those talks, it didn't feel true to me. And what it felt like to me was like they were wanting to inspire fear in people. That there was a certain group of people in the UFO community who are really interested in inspiring fear in people. And because fear serves certain nefarious forces. And I've talked about this a lot over the last year and a half about how it's really important for us to stay hopeful and to keep our vibe up, because when our vibration is low and we let ourselves kind of fall into despair and fear, negative forces can feed off of that. And then it's very hard for us to move forward as a people when we're kind of stuck in the lower vibration energy and demoralized. And also it allows them to feed off of us energetically. So I was sensing that at this event, that there was a certain group of people who were kind of invested in producing and reproducing or increasing levels of fear. And so the problem with this theory, and so when I just asked now, what I got was an image of certain people who are associated with lizard people or these type of ETs who are actually trying to control humanity. And it reminds me of something my guide said quite a while ago about Starboy. They said that he was one of those people, that he was sent here by a certain group of star beings, and they're trying to get control of us through him. And that's why he signed on to finagle the joust for head clowns, because his plan was to take control of the whole government and actually the world. That's why he's also gone to other countries to finagle their jousts. And what my guide said was the reason there were so many ETs, orbs, what have you, that were around the planet starting in December of 2024 was because they were coming here to watch and make sure that didn't happen, because it's a violation of like some type of prime directive. They're not allowed to come here and take control of us. However, they had found a loophole by working with humans. And so this lizard people idea is based on fact. It's kind of been blown out of proportion to the point where people think that everything is controlled by some group of lizard people. And that's the part that I'm getting is not true. But there is a part of it that's true. And that part is that there are beings who do want to take control, but they're not allowed to because of a galactic law. And so their workaround is to try to get control of humans, and then those humans get control of governments. And that way they can say, well, it's not us. Those are actually humans that are making those decisions. So I am seeing that there are certain people who are connected with beings like that. But what my guides told me is that we don't have to worry about this, because we have turned a corner in terms of our own sovereignty. We've kind of been asleep for quite a while, and we have allowed different forces, not just outside forces, but also, in terrestrial forces, negative forces, satanic forces, greed, and sexual violence, right? These are all forces. We don't actually have to go off world to come up with these negative forces that have been in control of certain aspects of our government, right? The network of bad traffic has shown us that. That's like a ritual abuse that's been going on for a long time. And the energy from that, the energy that's collected from the ritual abuse, has given certain people like the head clown power. That's why he's been Teflon coated and untouchable, is because he got a lot of power from these rituals. So yes, there are negative forces who have control of certain aspects, but they don't control everything, and they're controlling less and less over time because the people are rising up. Our consciousness is rising up. We are becoming more and more aware of the true nature of our world, and we are becoming much more involved in our own sovereignty. And this is especially true with women. We're seeing the rise of women. And so things like the 62 million grape academy revelation that came out on CNN last week, this is just confirming what women have always said, right? This is just confirming what all the survivors of Epi said. This is just confirming what the majority of women already know, and that's that we live in a grape culture where grape is not an anomaly, it's very much the norm, right? And you can ask if you're a man in this chat and you don't believe this, go do a survey of all the women in your life. Ask them if they've experienced what they're at, or just maybe they might not want to tell you stuff, but you can say, did this Grape Academy thing shock you? Did it seem very unusual or something that you wouldn't have expected? Ask them, has grape been a part of their life? You could ask it kind of in, a vague way, like, has grape been something that you've worried about? Has essay been something you've had to deal with? And just see what they say, right? Everyone's going to tell you the same thing. We've all had to deal with it our whole lives. But this kind of stuff needed to come out for us to begin. It's kind of just, we needed this confirmation so that to help raise the consciousness. So a lot of women right now are involved in the 4B movement, which started in South Korea, where women are saying, no dating men, no sleeping with men, no marrying men, no having children with men. And it went from it went from Korea to Europe, and now it's also in the US. And so the birth rates have gone down in all of these countries, including ours. And you can just listen to the discourse online about what women are saying about dating, and about how women are just losing their tolerance for bad behavior, right? And so this is part of the shift in consciousness. There's all these shifts going on. We're becoming more aware of global power networks. We're becoming more aware of the abuse of women. We're becoming more aware of racism. We're becoming more aware of a lot of things, right? And this is how we wake up, and this is how we step fully into our power. Everyone, men, women, non-binary, we all are stepping into our power. Okay, so for entertainment purposes only, YouTube. Thank you for the reminder, Linda Bishop. All right, so let's see. What other questions? Oh, here's another question. Okay, so we heard this story that was leaked. And was it in the New York Times? I can't remember which paper put this out. But there was a whole story about how he was being left out of military briefings because he was too erratic, and also because he was wanting to use the codes, right? And so this question is, what's the truth behind somebody wanting to do that to Persia? I got to be really careful. Recently, and being stopped by one of the military leaders. I'm going to tune in. Yeah. So what I'm seeing is I'm seeing some different leaders, different military leaders, and they were kind of tussling over this. Um, so he was trying to give a command to somebody to say, "Oh, let's do this," and and then kind of a little like battle ensued. Um, and the reality is, in order to use those codes, you have to have like three different people in high levels of command have to all like push him at the same time. Like one person can't do it. It has to involve, I think, at least three different people. And so I'm seeing this image of like these three people, and they're disagreeing. They're like, no, we're not going to agree to do this. And they would all three have to agree to do it for it to happen. And that just, the agreement was not there. And so, yes, that's true. There was a disagreement between military leaders and Head Clown, and that's why it didn't happen. And the reason why he wanted to do that, the reason why he's been threatening it for a couple of weeks, is because he's losing, right? And what all of the military leaders have told him, including the ones that resigned and or got fired because they refused to follow orders, they've all told him the same thing, that this is an unworkable plan. We cannot win this war. We cannot have a ground offensive. We cannot take their, I can't say that word either, their ingredients for a kaboom. We cannot eliminate all of their leaders. Like, none of the plans are going to work for lots of reasons. Mostly it's geographical. It also has to do with how their military structure is set up. It's decentralized. Has to do with just the location of the strait and the movement of oil. Like, there's a lot of factors. And that's why for decades, It's Not Real has been asking like every president to start this war. And every president said no, because their military advisors told them it's a reckless endeavor. We can't win it. And so because he knows he can't win it, they keep telling him it's not going to work and they won't cooperate. And there's all this mutiny in the ranks. He thought, oh, well, if I just do this and wipe them off the earth, that's a win, right? And all he cares about is a win because, narcissist, right? So yeah, and he doesn't have any concept of, consequences, right? We know this, right? Because he's not ever faced consequences in his life. So he doesn't really understand consequences. So that's what I'm getting for that. Okay. Veg Girl 16. I'm going to answer this question based on what my guides have already told me. I don't even have to tune in because I don't think anything has changed. But they've told me this already, that this would never happen, that the toy soldiers are not going to turn on the people. And we see proof of that now. So they told this to me like months ago. I said this months ago when people were worried about sea war. When they dispatched the Guard, right? When the Guard was first dispatched to Los Angeles, people were like, oh no, they're going to like federalize the Guard throughout the country and take over and put the people under, what were they calling it? Curfew or whatever it's called. There's a name for it. I'm forgetting. And people were all worried about that. Oh, they're going to put us under this like military rule or curfew. And my guides were saying from way back, no, that's not going to happen because they don't support him. And so, and we're seeing lots of evidence of that now. So we've had major resignations at the highest level. And we're also seeing record number of conscientious objection in the ranks. And we're also now seeing, just as of yesterday, they reported over 700 service members from the Gulf are trying to resign or request transfer out of the region because they don't support this conflict. And then, of course, the head of the Navy, who's in charge of the blocky block, right? The number one military strategy at this time, right? The head of that is like, I'm out. So there is lots of evidence that my guides were right when they said months ago, we don't have to worry about the military being used against the people. And because he has never been popular with the military. He doesn't respect the military. He's a draft dodger 5 times, right? He disrespects them. He cut their funding. He calls them losers. And so even though the military is typically a more conservative group politically and might tend to vote more for red hats in the past, they've never supported the circus in large numbers. And this is one of the things that distinguishes him from his mentor, the mustache man in Germany, is that the mustache man in Germany had the support. He had a very strong military that supported him. He also had popular support. He was very popular. The Germans at that time were, they were really racist, and they really didn't like a lot of people. They didn't like gypsies. They didn't like blacks. They didn't like Jewish people. They didn't like a lot of people. And so they were totally on board with Mustache Man. And in the US, we have like a third of our population that is super, super racist and sexist and homophobic and totally on board with head clowns, prejudice, right? But he doesn't have the military, and the difference. That's the difference. He doesn't have popular support, and he doesn't have popular military support. And so, no, they're not going to turn against the people. In fact, I would predict that if there were a rise up, if people were to rise up against the circus, I would predict that the military would join the side of the people. That's my prediction. Yeah, they are firing, and or they're leaving in protest, or they're being fired because they refuse to follow orders. And yeah, some of them do support him, but we have lots of evidence though now that we've never seen anything like this. If we compare this to the last unpopular conflict, right? Vietnam. It has the same numbers, right? As soon as it was declared, not in a few years in, like with the Vietnam thing, it was a few years in where people were like really turned against it, because back then we actually had news. We had TV news with actual footage of what was going on over there. We don't have that now. We don't know what's going on. We don't even know how many people have died. But even though we don't have any information, like we have no mainstream media covering what's going on over there, 75% of Americans are opposed to this conflict and have been from day one. So it's as unpopular as Vietnam. But also we're seeing record numbers of people who are refusing to go and claiming conscientious objection, and then people who are already enlisted who are trying to resign. And that just doesn't happen. That's very unusual. When they write about this in the history books in the future, they're going to be able to, talk about all these trends and how things are happening, which have never happened before in terms of the military. Here's a question from Marianne McCord. We got 572 people in here. Woohoo! Do you think that the Magatonians are going to physically take the clown out by themselves? So this was something I was shown a while ago. Let me tune in and see if there's something new about it. Yeah, so there has been a change. So what I was shown a while ago was that something was going to happen having to do with the head clown, and that the Magatonians were going to come out like with their pitchforks and tiki torches and surround the House of White and demand answers. So I wasn't really clear, and then I saw also a scene with them joining up with the Persistence and together storming the House of White. So these are two visions I've seen. And now when I tune in and ask, okay, what's changed? Has anything changed from that vision I saw a few months ago? I saw, yeah, what's changed is now there are people having meetings. So there are actually people who are sitting down in meeting rooms and trying to strategize how to get him out. And so that's like a new layer. So what we had before was we had the persistence, right? A whole lot of people who are just really angry about the circus, including the people who didn't put tickets in for it, the majority, and then also people who have just woken up over the last 18 months and realized, hey, this isn't, I did choose this, but now I'm having second thoughts. And so we had like popular movements, right? And we still have those popular. We have a popular movement by the persistence, and we have a popular movement by the ex-Magatonians, right? And so what I had been shown is that these two popular movements might unite. Unite is maybe too strong of a word. Maybe I shouldn't say unite. Fold together. Like if you have two waves in the ocean and then they hit each other and then they create a new wave, right? Two frequencies. They're different frequencies, but when they get added together, they create a new frequency. So that's kind of what I see, is that these two movements add to one another to form a bigger movement. And when I ask what's new today, I see meetings. And so I feel like this might be related to the Congress, how they're actually trying to strategize how to remove him. So we do know that 50 lawmakers came together to create a petition, to create a committee, to do a cognitive assessment of the clown to see whether or not the 25th Amendment could be invoked. And a lot of people were of the belief that the only way to get the 25th Amendment invoked was to have the cabinet invoke it. But it turns out in the Constitution, there's another way, and that can involve Congress creating their own committee to evaluate him. And so they're in the process of trying to do that. And then, of course, there are also articles of impeach that have been filed. So these are two different strategies, right? And so what I'm seeing right now is a lot of meetings. And it's not just people on the Hill. As I'm tuning in more, I'm getting more information. It's also power brokers. And this is also something that my guides had said a few months ago, was that behind the scenes, the power brokers, the tech pros, the corporations, the overlords, they are also talking amongst themselves and trying to figure out what to do, because things are not going the way they want them to go. They're not benefiting as much as they thought they would. They're benefiting. A lot of people are making a lot of money off of this conflict, for example. So all of these announcements he's been making, have been allowing all of these corporate bros to make all this money on the stock market, right? So they're still benefiting, right? But they're not benefiting enough, because now a lot of these companies are in danger. Their profits are in danger because of the energy crisis that's about to be upon us because of the whole Bermuda Strait situation. That's going to negatively impact all of them. Trade, the economy, sales, the AI companies, the data centers over there are being harmed. And so there's been a lot of chat behind the curtain about what do we do, because head clown is maybe working against our interests now. So we might have to get rid of him and replace him with someone else. And so these meetings that I'm seeing, there's like a lot of boardroom meetings and lawmaker meetings on the Hill. And so this is like another level. So we had already the persistence movement, which is ongoing, and we had the growing ex-Magatonia angry vigilante movement, which I've seen. And now added to these two movements, we have this third movement of power brokers and lawmakers having meetings, trying to strategize, okay, how can we get rid of him and still preserve our interests, right? All right, next question. So if you just came in here, I'm Dr. Jennifer Lisa Vest. I'm a psychic medium and a medical intuitive, and I'm also a precog. And since November of 2024, my spirit guides have tasked me with providing information, predictions to the public, and providing people with kind of the big picture of the spiritual significance of the political situation we find ourselves in. What I'm doing today is answering questions in the live political and spiritual questions about what's going on. And I'm answering them intuitively. Also answering them based on things that I know or things that my spirit guides have told me. Yeah, we got Sister France in the room, says everyone in France knows he's a clown. This person, Life Spark, agrees with me. Yeah, lemon gelato. The oligarchs have finally figured out that people without jobs don't buy their products. Exactly. Okay, I did see a question that was highlighted. And where did it go? I was holding forth on the last question, and now I can't see that one. Here we go. Here's a highlighted question. Thank you for the gift, Dr. Domenico. Dr. Vest, thank you for all you do. Would you be willing to speak, educate about the diversity in perspective of meditating with no attachments / Buddhism versus 4 a.m. Club meditation for healing and ascension? This is something that I talked about last week, right? And then I think the person that asked the question thought that I was misinterpreting the question. Because I think I got another comment about it, which I responded to on another video. So let me see if I can address this. Let me say some disclaimers first. I'm not a Buddhist. So obviously I'm not an expert on Buddhism. I know about Buddhism just because I've studied a lot of religions. And because as a philosopher and a philosophy professor, I did teach Buddhist ethics alongside, Western ethics, African ethics, Native American ethics. I taught a lot of things. So I have a little bit of understanding of Buddhism, right? Not claiming to know a lot about it. But I do know that one of the tenets of Buddhism is that suffering is caused by attachment, right? And if you're a Buddhist and you want to correct me in the chat about anything I say, feel free to. I fully understand that I am not a Buddhist scholar. But I do understand that kind of main tenet that suffering is caused by attachment. And so, and there are some kind of, there's a lot of overlap these days between different belief systems and spiritual traditions because people tend to just kind of borrow from different traditions. There's a lot of cultural appropriation and people kind of taking parts of traditions and using them for their own means. And so in kind of new thought community, religious science, sometimes people will combine religious science with Buddhism. And so there's, these different kind of approaches to meditation. So here's the thing about meditation. There are so many ways to meditate, And there's no one way that's the best way. Everyone should meditate in whatever way serves them and is like appropriate for them. We all have our own ways of meditating. But I think what Dr. Domenico is asking me about is this idea that people should not focus on a particular outcome, that if you are focusing in your meditation on like manifesting a particular outcome, then you are attached and that attachment causes suffering, right? Versus 4 a.m. Club meditation for healing and ascension. So one of the types of meditation that I have been leading, like I was leading meditation every day for several months on my TikTok lives. And before I switched to doing more, now I do YouTube lives, but I used to do, I started out doing TikTok lives and I used to lead a meditation every day, and the meditation was a guided meditation where I was leading people to envision the future. Envision the future you want to see. And I have been tasked with that by my guides to help people to envision the future that they want to see. That's a particular kind of meditation. And some people will criticize that and say, oh, you're getting too attached to a particular outcome. That's just a different belief system from mine. I believe that envisioning the future you want to see does a number of things for us. One of the things it does is it helps us to cope with a difficult situation. And I think it's something that, I can relate to because of my background, So I'm descended from African people who were enslaved and indigenous people who had their land stolen, right? And so my communities have had to learn how to cope with very difficult situations and to survive when it didn't even seem possible to survive. And one of the ways that these communities that I come from learned to survive was by dreaming, right? We were taught to dream. We were taught to dream of what we wanted to achieve, what we wanted our children to achieve. We were taught to dream of the world being better than it was. And it was our dreams that kept us going. And so I often say to myself that poem that Maya Angelou wrote, there's a line in one of her poems. She's a famous African-American poet. She's deceased now, but she was a poet laureate and a very powerful woman. And she has this poem where she says, I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And that's so true, and also, a lot of us, we always have to remind ourselves, if we are descended from enslaved people, we have to remind ourselves that the lives that we're living now are only possible because our ancestors dreamt us into existence, right? And in the Native community, we have this idea of the 7 generations, that you're always living as if you can see how the 7th generation after you is going to be living, right? You're dreaming the future. So that's why I tell people to dream. I tell people to keep envisioning what you want to see, keep dreaming it into existence. And I don't see it as attachment. I see it as how we survive. How do you survive an apocalypse? How do you survive extremely difficult circumstances? You survive them by dreaming, right? All right. I hope that answered your question. We got 644 in here. Yeah, Marianne Pine. That is one of the things my guide showed me about him, about Starboy, was that he was being controlled by certain star beings who had an agenda. All right, looking for more questions. Oh, here's a very general question from Libby Doe. What is your advice to folks now, especially women? Well, I think I just gave it partially, was to keep dreaming, right? Dreaming. Also, I would advise people to, cut yourself some slack and keep reminding yourself that you are living through the most difficult period in history. And, not in history, in recent history, let's put it like that. Obviously, it's not as bad as if you were enslaved or living through Indian wars, right? But recent history. We're going through something very, very challenging. And so we do have to give ourselves grace. And we have to remind ourselves every so often, hey, I'm going through an apocalypse right now. And it's okay if I'm not happy. It's okay if I'm stressed. It's okay if I'm not as productive as I used to be. If maybe I'm not getting as much work done. If I just find myself vegging out in front of the TV or just staring at the wall or eating too many comfort foods, right? Like engaging in too many pleasurable activities. I have to keep finding pleasurable activities just to keep my brain going through this highly stressful time, right? So that's one thing. Cut yourself some slack. Keep reminding yourself that these are very unusual times, and So you may be doing things that you didn't used to do or that you wouldn't be doing in other circumstances. And you might have to change your judgment of yourself and others, right? We also have to change how we judge others. Also, keep in mind, everyone doesn't have the same resources to handle crisis, right? This is a lesson it took me a long time to learn. I will admit I was very judgmental as a young person because I had a very difficult childhood and upbringing, and that made me very tough. And I tended to be judgmental of people who weren't tough and who were kind of wimping out or complaining about difficult things. I was like, oh, come on, buck up. What's your problem? And it's because I didn't understand when I was younger that other people didn't have the survival resources I had because they had not had to survive at a young age. They didn't know what that was like. So they had not developed those tools and strategies. And so that's going to be true of some of your neighbors and coworkers and people, in your family, maybe, who don't have the same resources you have for how to survive an apocalypse. And they're not going to be acting the way you think they should be acting. We got to cut them some slack too. And just remember, right? You can, let me, I like to tell stories that explain this. So there were two situations I was in that remind me of this metaphorically. I was in a hurricane in Florida, and it was really bad. It was really bad mainly because people were not prepared. I was not prepared because I didn't even know what a hurricane was. I had just gotten off a plane. I was there for my faculty orientation. I was starting a new job and had never lived anywhere with hurricanes, didn't know what they were, was totally unprepared. And it turned out that a lot of people were totally unprepared because for years, the weatherman had been saying, oh, it's hurricane season, but they hadn't landed. And so people were saying to me, oh, don't pay attention to the weather. They always talk about hurricanes. They never happen. And so we were totally unprepared. And so what happened was we went from being like a first world country to a third world country overnight. So the roads were no longer passable. The gas stations didn't have gas. The banks didn't work. The electricity was out. There was no phone service. The cell towers were out. There was no food. The food was rotting. And it was a really dire situation. And what I noticed was different people responded differently. And what I saw, the main response from a lot of people was to look out for each other. So people who did have gas in their car were picking up hitchhikers to take them to the grocery store so we could get something to eat. There were people getting food out of their freezers and barbecuing it and feeding all their neighbors. Most people were very kind and kind of coming together to deal with the crisis together. That's the way most people responded to the crisis. But not everybody's going to respond to the crisis that way. Some people are going to just be in it for themselves and be like, it's all about me. Every man for himself, survival of the fittest, right? And so, that's where we find ourselves now, where everyone's not necessarily handling things the same way. But this is a great opportunity for us. Whenever you're in a crisis of any kind, it's an opportunity for you to rise to the occasion and be the best possible version of yourself. And that's what we're all getting to do right now. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing that we get this opportunity to be of service. There really isn't anything more powerful than being given an opportunity to serve, to help others. And so whenever you're in a crisis, you're being given an opportunity to serve. You also have an opportunity to run and hide or to just think about yourself, right? You have a lot of opportunities. You have a lot of options. But it's an amazing time right now to figure out, how can I help? How can I help? Something terrible is going on. What unique gifts and skills do I have that I can repurpose in this moment to be of service? So that would be my advice to everyone of all genders. And the second part of your question is, what is my advice to women? My advice to women is to step fully into your power right now. we have been told, we have been gaslit our whole lives about grape culture. We have been having to deal with patriarchy our whole lives, and we've had everyone telling us it's not real, it's not happening, everyone's equal, you're tripping. And now that it's all coming out, right, how bad it really is, right, from the files to the Grape Academy, right, it's all coming out. It's all coming out. And so this is your chance. If you are a woman, I feel like this is our opportunity to be bolder, to speak out more, to share our stories. In fact, I'll be an example of it. I'm going to share a story. You know, as a woman, I have had my entire life, I've had to very carefully navigate my world to make sure or to minimize the chances of my being a victim of sexual violence, right? And of course, no matter what I did, there was no way I could guarantee that that wasn't going to happen to me, right? And there were just so many instances throughout my life, especially when I was younger, because when you're younger, you're more vulnerable, and predators, they like to go after the most vulnerable. And so when I was in my 20s, this is just one story. I was in, I'm not going to say what country because I don't want anything to be held against a particular country, but I was traveling and I was in another country. And it was actually a lovely country. I had wonderful experiences there. However, I also dealt with a lot of sexual harassment and sexual assault. So I would ride the buses in the main city, and men would put their hands on me, would physically grab me, and nobody would stop them. I would, yell at them and say, get your hands off of me. But it happened several times and nobody did anything, right? It was just me against whatever guy was groping me. I also was in a situation once where I was on a kind of like a hike trying to get from one village to another village, and a man started following me, and I very politely told him, I wasn't interested. He was trying to talk to me, flirt with me or whatever. And I was all by myself in the country, and I was also a really not much, there wasn't much to me. I was very thin. I was very, very scrawny. I'm much, much bigger now. And he was trying to whatever, talk. And then he said to me, that he was going to grape me because there was nobody around to hear me scream. And if he wanted to, he could get away with it. And there was nothing I could do because I was too far from the nearest town. Right now, I ended up talking him out of it. But this is just these are just two stories from just one trip I took, right? I went on lots of trips around the world. And this is just what it's like to be a woman. If you travel, if you live in a city, if you live anywhere, if you're a woman, you have to deal with the constant threat of rape and also SA, like people just assaulting you in public transportation or just on the street or whatever. In your home, right? I think we all need to start telling these stories. And so that was just me sharing a story as a model, as an example. Like we all need to start telling. I have so many stories, right? Like we all do. We all have lots of stories like that. That's the truth of the matter. And we've been trained to not talk about it, right? Let's not dwell on that. Let's not talk about it. I survived, right? We all need to start telling those stories. So that would be my advice, is that we all start telling those stories to everybody, publicly, to our family members, to any men in your life. Like they all need to know. They all need to know the reality, right? We need to stop hiding. Because it doesn't make us weak to tell those stories. It makes us strong, right? Okay, here's someone telling a story. I'm going to put it up here for everyone to see, from Deborah Fleeson. I've been followed into a public bathroom. He tried to give me drugs. I refused. He did not touch me, but he followed me for blocks to my bus stop. I told a cop and he couldn't do much. Yeah, I've been followed so many times and harassed on the street. So many of us have. We all need to tell these stories. 674. Welcome, everybody. If you just signed in, I'm taking questions. I'm tuning in, giving intuitive answers to questions live in the chat. And if you want to support me, you can buy me a coffee. I don't know which way it is. There's a little QR code up there, or you can send me a gift, become a member of my Patreon or a YouTube member. And I want to thank all my members who are currently members. If you are a member, I just uploaded a members only video, I think yesterday or the day before. So check it out. And so thank you everybody for your support. Okay, questions. Thank you for the love. Yeah, thank you for all the love. Okay, so I'm just looking for questions. Okay, here's a question about the partner of Epi. I guess there's some rumor about her getting a pardon, and this person is what's the name? Connie Crone. This wise woman is asking, what will that do to the base? All right. So first thing I get is this is something that's been in the works for a long time. They've been trying to make this happen for a long time. So back and forth between Griselda. Well, we're going to call her Griselda and Head Clown, back and forth, trying to make this happen. It's been kind of a long negotiation. And the weaker he gets, the stronger her plea is, because her leverage against him is that she could release stuff that would incriminate Head Clown. And so she's telling him, listen, if you don't release me, I'm going to release the info. And she's got info stashed away all over the world in different places that can be released on her say-so. And she's trying to use it. And the weaker he gets, the stronger her demands are, because the weaker he gets, the more vulnerable he is to incriminating information, finishing him off in the public view, in the base view, we should say. The general public is already done with him, but that small percentage of people who still support him, they would be done with him if certain files actually came out. And she knows that, and so she's threatening him. And he's really kind of a cornered rat right now. He's losing on every front. He's losing health-wise. He's losing the conflict. And he's obviously losing the popular choice. He's losing in terms of the terms of mid, right? They're clearly going to lose all of those. The red hats are clearly going to lose. If they're held, it's the writing is on the wall, right? They're all going to lose, and then they're all going to go to jail. So he's kind of a cornered rat. And so Griselda is trying to take advantage of that. She's like, look, you better let me go, because if I release, just 1/10 of what I have, that's going to be the final nail in the coffin for you. So will it happen? It's hard to tell, because he very much wants to do it, but he's very close to being ousted. Either he's gonna shuffle off the mortal coil, or he's going to be removed with the big hook, because there's all these meetings going on to remove him. So the timing, and see, here's the other thing about this is, there are a lot of other people implicated who've been trying to control the release of files because it's going to incriminate them. And so they also support a pardon. Okay, so I'm not getting a yes or no. I'm getting a it depends on the timing. Sorry, I can't answer that part of it. In terms of the base, yeah, I already answered that part, I guess, because what I'm getting from the base is they're already really, really upset about the files. And I don't know that her pardon would be the big event, but any more of the files coming out will be the end of their support. There are a million mentions, right? He's mentioned a million times. So we're talking about a whole lot of incriminating information. And just as a reminder, what my guides have said before, it was not an epi network. It was a head clown network. So head clown had more power in that network than epi. And this is what some of the survivors have recently said. They've confirmed what my guide said so long ago. They've said that epi worked for head clown. What I saw is not exactly that. What I saw was that they were business partners, that it was not an epi running things and a head clown being a client. That's not the relationship. They were both running things. That's what I saw. What some of the survivors are saying is that there's actually a hierarchy with head clown above epi. So I don't know exactly what the relationship was hierarchically, but I know that it was just as much a head clown network as it was an epi network. And so that's what's in the files. That's why he's in there a million times, because he was the head clown, right? He was one of the head clowns. Is that the right word for that network? He was one of the head, let's say, one of the head traffic controllers for the bad traffic. So that's what I see as being more important to the base than her pardon. All right, I'm just looking for some more questions. Oh, here's a Buddhist. Let's hear from a Buddhist. Libby Doe. Oh, they're not even talking to me. They're talking to Kelsey. So I'm probably in the middle of a conversation. Buddhism informs my daily practice. Detachment does not mean, in my opinion, divorce from being human. It means grounding and being human and reacting with composure and or fire as needed. Thank you for that education. I do think the philosophy of non-attachment is a really, really powerful one. I think it's really powerful. Here's a question. Yes, the answer is yes. Did he provide girls through the pageants? Yes. This is one of the things that my guide showed me quite a while ago. It's funny how they tell me things, and then over time I understand it better. Because one of the things they showed me, and I think I probably posted about it at some point, was that when it comes to the bad traffic, they said the perpetrators and the traffic controllers of this bad traffic network are not always who we think they are. Because we have in our mind, this is how patriarchy works. It tries to tell us that these kind of acts are only occasional and they're rare, and these are just like bad actors. And the pedophile is like that greasy, scary looking dude hanging out in the bushes. Like, right? That's the PDF, right? And in fact, the PDF is like your minister, your neighbor, your teacher, your doctor, right? They're just regular people who are in every career. And same with rapists, right? They don't look a certain way. They're not hiding in the bushes. Most rapists are people they're in your family or your neighborhood or your coworker or your friend. And you can't look at them and tell. And the same with PDF. You cannot look at them and tell. And so my guides were showing me this a while ago. They were showing me the network of bad traffic, and they were showing me how there were all of these different institutions involved that people were going to be really surprised about when the truth came out. And one of the one of the ways they described it is they said anywhere there is an organization that's focused on children, a lot of those organizations are a part of the network. So they gave me pictures of like orphanages, charities that worked on helping children, any type of contests, summer camp, schools, any religious programs for youth. They were showing me all of these different institutions focused on young people, children of different ages, not just little children, but also teenagers, right? Different ages of children and youth, right? That these institutions, a lot of them were involved in the bad traffic, and people were going to be really surprised when they found out. So like you might think of this charity that's helping orphans as this wonderful organization, and it turns out that they are a node on the bad traffic network. And so the pageants were one of the nodes. The modeling agencies that were recruiting teenage girls into modeling were a part of the traffic. So this is gonna come to light. A lot of these organizations were involved in the bad traffic. Okay, let's see. We don't want to, I'm going to try to answer some different questions because I don't want, it could be triggering for us to have to, keep talking about this. So let's find a question that's not about that. Okay, I'm just looking for more questions. Oh, apparently there's some conversation about a council. Someone wants me on the council. Which council? I did predict a long time ago that there's going to be a council. Oh, here it is. Oh, so that's what the question. I know you guys are having your own conversations, and so I'm trying to jump in on it. Lisa Skelton. Can you see more about the upcoming new council style of government that's coming into this country? So that's one of the things that I saw, and that a lot of other dreaming women, dreaming people saw, that there was going to be a new government structure. It's not going to be the current structure. So let me see what else I can get about that. And so I'm being shown right away this vision, this image I saw so long ago that gave me hope. And it was this image of Kamala on a dais wearing a white suit. And it was springtime. And in that original vision, I saw her as part of a council, not a president, but a council. So and so I'm seeing like lots of different councils, like council here, council there, council here, and the councils working together to have this kind of non-hierarchical structure of government. So kind of like our idea of checks and balances, but real checks and balances, where this council makes certain decisions and this makes this council, and then they confer, and then this other council makes decisions. So instead of us having a legislative branch, a judicial branch, and a executive branch, we're going to have different councils, because our current structure, we now know, doesn't work. So, and there's a way in which it hasn't worked well for a while, but we were able to kind of ignore that because it was working well enough. We've had corruption for quite a while. You can't even run for office unless you're a millionaire. So that really determined, what kind of things could happen in the legislative branch. And the same with the executive. You couldn't even run for that office unless you were a certain person connected to certain families. So, but we're just kind of now with the circus really realizing how broken the system is. And so it's going to have to be completely restructured. and we're not going to have the system we currently have. Now, the purpose of the councils is to avoid the tyranny of the people. I think that's a term from a certain political ideology that I can't remember. But there's always a risk whenever you have like a revolution that, there'll be lawlessness and the destruction of institutions and the loss of civility, and then there can be a new form of tyranny that is born from whoever the popular leaders are of the movement. And so we've seen that throughout history in different situations in different countries where there was a revolution and then there were excesses that were enacted by the people who took charge of it. And so one of the ways to protect against that is to move away from the whole idea of a charismatic leader. And so this is one of the things that my guides have said, is that we're not going to have that model anymore. So we've had that model since the beginning of our country, George Washington, right? We've had this model of having this one, always male, always white, always rich leader, and having this hierarchical structure where we have this one leader, always except for the one exception, right? Obama. Charismatic leader who we elect. And we're going to move away from that model, and we're going to move away from the whole idea of an individual being a leader. And we're going to move towards councils, which is more of a matriarchal, matrifocal, indigenous kind of democratic way of governing, where power is spread out and it's not dependent on one person or on a small group of elites. And so this is a whole new way of governing. And it doesn't allow for a popular leader to become the end all and be all. And so if there is a, popular movement, evolutionary with an R movement in this country, it's not going to lead to the installment of some Che Guevara, some big liberation leader, because that's just going to cause us to reproduce the mistakes of the past, right? Patriarchy always requires that we operate in a hierarchy with a man at the top and then other men below him, and the elites running everything for the masses. And so the new structure is going to be more diffuse and less focus on one person, and more of a focus on how people can work together in groups. Okay. All right. And if you want your question answered right away, you can send one of those highlighted ones with a little gift. Then I'll see it right away. Yeah, we don't want mob rule. Exactly. Moon beatification. Yes, it is going to resemble indigenous councils. Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. Yeah, she did. So in her book, Lotus Queen said that the system is broken and needs resetting. Veronica is just giving us little evidence to support what I was sharing about the guides and how the essay works in these institutions. Okay, here's another question from Otterific. Do you see something happening to our food supply chain? Well, you don't really have to be a psychic to know that something's going to happen to our food supply chain because of the strait. Um, Shipping is going to be impacted. Farming is going to be impacting by the loss of fertilizer. Um, but let me tune in. Yeah, so I'm seeing that there are going to be certain things that we can't get, certain things. I'm seeing a lot of canned goods, so I guess we're going to be relying more on canned goods um, than we used to. And there's going to be some things available, other things not available. There's going to be a shift. It's going to, the long term, I always tend to see the long term, the bigger picture. The long-term impact is that it's going to move us more to decentralized farming, away from agribusiness and more smaller farms. More people will be, you know, having their own gardens. I do recommend everyone have a garden to get your produce so that you're not dependent on fluctuations in the market. And of course, have your canned goods ready. So yeah, there is going to be a disruption in our food supply chain. We're not going to be, it's, I don't see starvation. I don't see anything like that. But changes, yeah, changes and shifts. And long term, it's going to be good because it's going to move us away from these centralized farming models. Because we actually have the capacity to grow enough food to feed everybody and for no one to go hungry. But currently, our farms are controlled in such a way that food is thrown out. People are not allowed to grow certain things. Certain food is shipped from one place to another place, even though the people there are hungry. There's a lot of problems. And some of those are going to be exposed by this shipping issue. It's going to be yet more revelation for us about how our agribusiness works and how our food supply is dependent upon our oil supply and how our oil supply is being controlled by these elites, right? Like a lot of this information is going to be coming out. And for some people, this has been a consistent theme that my guides have shared, is that for some people, they won't really take things seriously until they feel it themselves. And so when really large systems get impacted, like the price of gas, that affects everybody who's not wealthy, right? Wealthy people, doesn't matter. They can pay anything for gas. But anyone who's not wealthy, which is the majority of the country, is being negatively impacted by the price of gas. Same with food supply issues. It's going to affect everybody who's not wealthy. It's already impacting everybody we're already all impacted, right? We've all seen our groceries go way, way up, and we've all had to adapt and adjust, right, to what's available in terms of food, in terms of what we can afford. And so it's not that it's going to be dramatically different. It's kind of more of the same, but slightly different, right? Because now there are lots of people who can't afford to buy certain foods, right? And so in effect, those foods are not on the shelves anymore for them, right? And so in the future, when we have food supply issues, then those foods are not available for anybody, no matter how much money you have. So it's not really dramatically different. It's just kind of more intense, right? That certain foods are out of reach for a larger number of people because they've become prohibitively expensive, or in some cases because they're just no longer available. This could have a positive impact on us by having it bring people together to start community farms and to share produce with each other, to start trading bartering. I've got zucchini, you've got watermelon, let's swap, right? I'm not growing it. I don't have a garden, but I'll trade you something else for your vegetables, right? So this is one of the positive things that can come out of a food supply chain issue. But the food supply chain issue and the oil supply issue are the things that are putting pressure on people in power to try to remove the head clown, because they don't want to deal with it, with what that's going to do to their businesses, right? And so and that's also the silver lining of it, is that it's going to put pressure. It's currently putting pressure, and it's going to put more and more pressure on people in a position to do so, to remove him. So that's the upside of it. We've got a couple of highlighted questions I want to answer. Okay, here we go from Amy Goodrich. Will more epi files, especially in regards to the cabal, I think you want to ask, are they going to come out? Exposing those that we don't even know. Yes, more are coming out. You know, it's interesting because, my guides kept telling me for the longest time that files were going to come out no matter what, because there were copies of them in lots of locations, and that they were going to be released from other countries. And I felt like I just kept waiting and waiting, like, when is that going to happen? And now we're in this kind of crunch where a lot of countries are being negatively impacted, or are about to be negatively impacted by what is happening in the Gulf. And as a result, there is now much more pressure on some of those other countries to possibly release the files as a reaction to how we are harming them, right? So up until now, it's been really frustrating waiting, like, okay, China, okay, Russia, okay, like, when are you guys going to release some stuff? We know you have it. Also, Persia is now saying they got stuff to release. It's possible. And they haven't been, because the leverage has been more important thus far. And so when you have something like that, it's a form of blackmail, right? You can hold it over someone's head and get what you want. And so Rasputin has been doing that, right? With the war over there with our head clown. He's been putting pressure on our head clown not to assist them. And why? Because he definitely has all the files, because we know from the files that Epi installed the cameras with the help of Rasputin's land. Like, he was working for them, and they were the ones that installed the cameras. So we actually know that from the files. And so they definitely have copies of the stuff that their own cameras picked up, right? Of their own agent. So, but they've had a deal, right? They've had a deal going, and it was working for them. They did get head clown to stop funding and to sabotage, as much as possible, that one side of the conflict. Now, the same with, when it comes to China and some other countries, the other one is the Arabia, right? Arabia also has information, and Arabia is very heavily involved in the bad traffic. That was one of the things I was shown. They're one of the nodes. So they were definitely working with head clown and Epi and other to traffic throughout the Gulf region. They're all becoming destabilized now because of what we're doing. And so they're they're all threatening, they're all kind of no longer wanting to be in partnership with us. So they've come out. A lot of those countries over there have come out, and the GCC have come out and said, we don't trust the US anymore, and your bases can't be here, and we're not going to join the fray. A next step could be that Arabia who has access to some of the files says, okay, you have totally let us down, so we're going to release these. The thing is, they have to get something in return, right? So that's the problem with people who are not moral beings, right? They don't do things because it's the right thing to do. They do things because it serves an interest. And so that's why we're waiting for these things to come out. Now, another group that is also on the verge of changing their position are some of these lawmakers. So remember I said I'm seeing all of these meetings. Some of those people, they're trying very hard, right, to keep the files out. So if you haven't kept up, the oversight committee is the committee that got the Transparency Act, sponsored that bill to get it passed. They're the ones that issued the subpoena against Blondie. They're the ones that have been doing all this work around the files. Well, the red hats who are on that committee are now refusing to let the committee meet because they want to create contempt charges for Blondie. And so to prevent that from happening, because they don't want her to be forced to tell the truth, they're refusing to let the committee even meet. They're only letting them do these things called roundtables where you can't actually do decision making. So, but that might change. That might change as the momentum builds to remove him from office. There's going to be less support for keeping the files hidden, because some of the people who are doing all this work to keep them hidden are doing so to support Head Clown. That's why they're doing it. Some of them are doing it to hide their own crimes, right? There's different motivations. But they're not all in them. So there are some people who are just doing it to protect the Head Clown because they have their own reasons for wanting him to stay in power, just serve their own interests. But I do think we're just going to keep seeing more and more come out because the people just aren't going to let it go. They're just not going to let it go. Here's another question. Thank you for the gift. I forgot to thank the last person for the question and the gift. Thank you, Denise, for the gift. Will our debts be zeroed out when the money changes? I know there will be a cap on our money changing to the new currency. I have been nervous about the currency. I've been feeling like, the U.S. currency is going to get devalued. This is for entertainment purposes only. I'm not a financial advisor. But I have been feeling clairsentiently some nervousness around the U.S. dollars and the need to possibly get other types of currency in my bank account. There is going to be a decline. There's a decline in the status of the U.S., a decline in our currency, a decline in the value of a lot of things that are currently highly valued just because they're American. So there are a lot of things that are overvalued because they're American. And we all benefit from that. And that's going to change. That's changing right now. And it's hard to see all the effects of that because it just looks like 100 different dominoes, where one thing affects another thing, affects another thing. I also have been feeling this energy around debts being canceled because here's the thing, our whole money system, I got to be careful what I say. So it's not based on anything, right? We don't have our dollar's not based on gold like it used to be. And I'm misstating that. It's not that it's not based on anything. It's based on oil, and that's changing, right? The petrodollar, and there isn't a backup. There's not like a gold reserve. So that means a lot of different things for us, good and bad. The good thing that comes out of that is that when all of that comes to the surface, again, it's the period of revelation. We're in the period of revelation. A lot is coming to the surface. Some of it's ugly, some of it's really unexpected, right? But things are coming to the surface. And when some of the truth comes to the surface about the true value of the American dollar and the American economy and a lot of things, the overvaluing of all things American, when that comes to the surface, and then when the value goes down of a lot of things, that's hardship, right? But the flip side of that is that at the same time that we discover that a lot of these things are built on illusion, a lot of these values and currencies are built on illusion, we're also going to realize that the debts are also built on illusions. So that's the good side of it, right? Is that a lot of things get canceled at once. So yeah, it's like you can't really have one without the other. So if you believe in the current system, monetary system, then you believe in the debt, right? But once you stop believing in the current structure, then you can't hold on to the debt too, right? It's all going to go. So I'm glad you asked this question, because I wasn't aware of this until you asked this question, until I tuned in just now. And it's giving me some hope, because I've been nervous about what I see as the declining value of the US dollar and how that's going to impact all of us, our retirement funds, our savings accounts, our everything, right? But now that I'm realizing that it's also going to eliminate a lot of, if not all, debt, I'm realizing that, hey, we might come out okay, depending on your debt to income ratio. Basically, it's a house of cards, and once one part of the house of cards falls, the whole house falls. I hope that's not too dramatic for some people as a metaphor. So yeah, that's my answer to that. I hope that was helpful. I'm not a financial advisor. Here's another question. Thank you for your gift, Peony Lady Kim. How do you think the faith community will react to ETs when they make contact? They have been taught ETs are demons. Yeah, have they all been taught that? I mean, I don't know. I know that there are some Christians who have been taught that. I'm trying to think. Have Muslims been taught that? Have Jews been taught that? I don't know. Have Buddhists been taught that? So I'm interrogating your question a little bit. The faith community, it's kind of a generic umbrella. Let's ask the question instead, how will it affect religion? I think it's going to be really good. Because we currently have a situation where religious structures are oppressing a lot of people. And it's true that any belief system, any spiritual belief system, can be used to oppress, right? Can be used, can be misused, right? No matter how beautiful the teachings are in their original form. Like I remember as a child, I read the Bible when I was 12. I read the Quran when I was 14. I remember when I read the Bible that the main message I got from the New Testament was love. And there was a song they used to sing, they'll know we are Christians by our love. And I remember thinking, why are people so off base? Like, how is Christianity able to defend slavery um, and the unaliving of women, and like so many egregious, and the stealing of all the land of the indigenous, right? Like all of these acts were defended by Christian churches, for example, even though the main message, right, of the prophet was of Jesus was love. So same thing with Islam and the prophet's message, and with Judaism and different messages of the different prophets, right? You have these beautiful teachings, or when you look at other religions like Buddhism and you know, Rastafarianism, or the Yoruba religion, or any religion you look at, there are all these beautiful ideas, and yet we can look at history and we can see how religions have been used to oppress people. And so that's one of the main things that's going to change when the ETs come, because one of the ways in which religion has been able to successfully get people to behave in certain ways, like oppress women, oppress gays, oppress psychics, right? Burn psychics, right? One of the ways in which they've been able to do this, kill people who belong to a different religion because they don't belong to yours, is by convincing people that the most powerful being in the world is their God. And if they don't listen to their God, they're going to be in trouble. Well, when the star beings get here, it's going to be obvious that that's not true, because the star beings are not going to fit into any of these religious stories, right? Except, as you say, as possible demons. And it's going to be obvious that they're not demons when they get here, because they're going to come in love, and they're going to come and they're going to teach us things, and they're going to be very helpful to us. And so, and they're going to have abilities which are godlike, right? Abilities which until now we only ascribed to, deities. And so that's going to really crumble the foundations of so many religions. And so as I'm just tuning into it right now, I am getting that for some people, it is going to be like, I don't even want to share this. For some people, it's going to be so devastating. For some people of faith, because it's going to be a complete shattering of their belief system. And when I feel it, how it feels to some people, it's so devastating that some people are going to unalive themselves, because they cannot make sense of it, right? There's no way for them they can't make sense of the fact that what they believed in their whole life was not true. And so that's what's going to happen to some of them, some of the what you call the faith community, is they're going to be devastated, and some people just won't be able to cope, which is really sad. It's really sad, and it just makes me wish that we could somehow enlighten them before they arrive, right? Like slowly get them used to the idea. And I don't know if that's possible. I mean, maybe if you're someone connected to a faith community, that could be your role, peony lady. Maybe that's why you're asking the question, because maybe you're one of the people that could help prepare people so that they're not so devastated. It's like when you're in a cult, like that's what's happening to some of these ex-Magatonians. They're really, some of them are devastated to discover that they were wrong about everything, right, with regard to the Magatonian cult. So And so I am seeing there will be some of that happening too, as more facts come out about Head Clown, especially with regard to the files and who he really was and what he really did. It's going to be devastating for his remaining members. But for most people, it's going to be a very positive thing. For most people, it's going to be a period of enlightenment, where our consciousness expands and we're freed from a lot of the shackles that we were living under before, both in terms of our thinking and in terms of our physical existence, are being shackled by political and economic systems that kept us from fully expressing our true self. Okay. Yes, wait a sage. We got to find our local farmers market, and all the gardeners have to unite. Oh, this is true too, lemon gelato. I do have a little thing to grow microgreens that I actually got from a farmer's market that I grow in my apartment. Because we don't all have land, right? I don't have any land. But I do have some things growing on my porch. Okay. I think I'm going to answer maybe just a couple more questions. But let me just take a little break and make a couple of announcements because I always forget to do that. I have 2 books, and one is called The Ethical Psychic, and one is called Sovereign Wisdom. Of course, they're not over here. I always say, I'm going to show them, and then I forget to bring them over to the computer. But one's called The Ethical Psychic, and it's a guidebook for healers and psychics to have an ethical practice. It's been very well received. If you did read my book and you want to, please review it on Goodreads or wherever you want to review it, Barnes & Noble or Amazon or wherever you bought it. Because the more reviews I get, the more people see the book, and then the more people read the book. And then I have another book, Sovereign Wisdom, which is about Native American philosophy. And it was published by an academic press, which means it's pricey. And I have no control over the price of either of these books because they're the publishers set the prices, right? They also make most of the money. Sovereign Wisdom is kind of pricey, a little warning. But if you've read that book, I would also appreciate it you reviewing it on Goodreads. And a lot of people have told me that they like my books. I've just gotten a lot of positive. See, here's Shannon Davis. I have gotten a lot of positive reviews, but I need more reviews. So if you've read my book, please review them. If you haven't read them, go check it out if you're interested. I also have I have courses on my website. I always forget to promote these too, but I have courses on my website. I teach a variety of courses that they're pre-recorded videos of me teaching. I have the introductory course I have is called Strategic Psychic, where you want to develop your psychic gifts. And then I have a bunch of other classes which are more advanced. Like I have a class on auras, which is for anyone dealing with energy healing. And that's also kind of an intro class, but it's more comprehensive. And then I have a class on how to read the Akashic records. And I also have a course on how to work as a medical intuitive, how to learn medical intuition. And those are all classes available on my website, which I've got to remember to put in here. Let me put my website in the chat. It's Dr. Vess Medical Intuitive. Make sure I type it right. Oh, it's not loading. Oh, there it is. So drvestmedicalintuitive.com is my website, and that's where my courses are, links to my books. I'm also going to be teaching a live course for the Shift Network at the end of June on medical intuition as integrative medicine. And this is for healthcare providers, healers, medical intuitives who want to learn how to use medical intuition to refer clients to diagnostics and other types of practitioners, and also to refer them to treatments. So those are some of my offerings. Oh, here's another good review. So Strategic Psychic is a really good class if you want to know more about the basics, meditation, forms of spiritual protection, spirit guides, etc. I go over all the clairs and give you exercises to develop different clairs. Here's another review in the comments for the book Ethical Psychic. Really have deep appreciation for the Ethical Psychic. I have to take my time in digesting its richness. Thank you. Okay. Ooh, I didn't see this. How exciting. Canada might join the EU. Here's the thing. Remember, I keep saying we're in the middle of a global restructure. So everyone is forming new alliances and new economic coalitions, right? It's all being restructured. One thing I was shown about Canada, Sister Canada, back in 2020, was that they said, the guide said back then, that Canada was going to become like our big sister. And a lot of Americans were going to move to Canada, and we were going to start to look to them for guidance in a lot of different ways. Oh, here's a question, interesting question from Old Soul Wisdom. When all of this happens, will the boards from, I think you mean borders, from one country to another be gone, like the Mexico, US, and Canada? Yeah, so first little history, right? These borders are artificial. So prior to the colonization of Turtle Island, a lot of indigenous people lived in places which now are called Canada in the US, or Mexico in the US. And so the border then crossed right through their communities. So there are indigenous communities at all of these borders who are forced to cross a border to go from one part of their homeland to another. So from an indigenous perspective, these borders have never been real. So there's a little context for you. So will the borders change? I'm just going to tune in now. It's interesting. The first thing I see is that, like, right now we have a very porous northern border because of racism, right? Like, the U.S. has never tried to prevent Canadians from coming into the U.S. illegally. And so I've personally known lots of Canadians who have told me that they can come and outstay their visa as long as they want, and nothing ever happens to them. I've also had, when I was in school, lots of classmates from European countries tell me the same thing, that if they were from Europe, especially Northern Europe, and they came here on a student visa and they just stayed for years, nothing ever happened to them, because our immigration policy has always been racist. It's always been just focused on people with brown skin, people from certain countries, people from the South, now people from the North. And so one of the first things I saw just now tuning into this question was that the opposite is going to be the case. The northern border is going to get to become a stronger border, and the southern border is going to become more porous. So right now the northern border is porous and the southern border is like militarized, right? And I see the opposite happening, not because of us, but because of Canada. Canada is actually going to start enforcing their border more to keep us out, because we're all going to be fleeing. I shouldn't say we're all going to be fleeing. That sounds so dramatic. I got to watch what I say, because sometimes it can be interpreted in a more dramatic way than I really meant. I'm a poet, you know. We're not all going to be fleeing. That was a big exaggeration. Um, it's just funny when you see images, right? And then you have to put it into words. It can be tricky sometimes. So what I'm shown is right now we don't have a lot of Americans going north. Well, we do right now, but we didn't like a year ago. And so historically, that hasn't really been a thing. Like that, Canada hasn't really had to concern itself with a whole lot of people coming from the south and using up their resources, right? But that's going to be a concern in the future. And so that border looks like it becomes stronger and the South becomes more porous, um, because that ceases to be one of our main concerns. It can no longer be one of our main concerns because we're going to have to start focusing on domestic issues more. Um, and we never had a domestic issue with immigration. There was never like there was never a it was never causing us a domestic problem. Um, that was the propaganda, but that wasn't the reality. And so there's going to be a shift to focusing on what our actual problems are. So I do feel like that's the first thing I saw was that kind of shift in which border is porous and which is more um, serious. Um, there's just a whole lot of shifting happening worldwide, um, with coalitions, with who's allies with who's trading with whom. Um, just so many changes are happening, um, because of us. And I guess the main thing I'm seeing is that we have to start looking within more. We're forced to because of the shift in the economy and the shift in our status. Um, it forces us to look more internally. It takes our attention away from other countries and focuses our attention more on, okay, we got problems. How do we fix them? And so we're not the same thing that we were before in terms of being a global power who's really focused on policing the world or um, extracting other people's resources or controlling the flow of energy, like controlling who fights with who. Like all of those things are changing. And as all those things change, um, our focus changes and our focus is more internal. And as a result, we can't really be focused on things like borders and immigration and other countries' conflicts the way we used to be. And so that will change how we perceive borders and how we enforce borders. Um, there's also a lot fewer people interested in coming here. So it which also makes the borders less relevant, because this used to be a place that a lot of people wanted to come, um, because they thought they'd have more opportunities here, um, and because of our shifting status and our shifting economic situation, um, we're just a lot less interesting or popular or desirable. So, with that decline in immigration, um, comes a decline in concern about borders, but also comes a lot of other declines too. So, um, the U.S. has always been a country of immigrants, and it's always economically dependent on immigrants, on the constant flow of people and cultures and money and trade in and out of this country has always been central to our success. And that's in flux right now. A lot that's in flux. So, oh, your last question was, will Mexico, US, and Canada become one country? No, because Canada is not going to have us. Although I know there is talk of like Canada taking certain parts of the US. I don't know. See if I get anything on that. Like there's talk of like Canada, Oregon, Washington joining Canada. But the impetus for that is on our side, not their side. Like California is the fourth largest economy in the world. And so it would be beneficial to Canada to adopt California. But yeah, I do see some interesting things going on with the West Coast in Europe, the West Coast in Europe, the West Coast in Asia, and the West Coast in Canada. So it looks like there is increasingly more of a state to state relationship between like California and the EU, California and China, California and Canada. That is moving in that direction. Yeah, it does feel like there are certain places that may try to negotiate something like that, like a secession to join Canada and leave the U.S. I do like kind of feel some energy around that in certain northern states like Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, Vermont. You know, there is some energy around that, but it feels one sided right now, except for California. It feels one sided. Um, I don't feel as much interest from Canada as I do from us. So, okay, one last question because we're at 2 hours. Um, oh, here's another gift. Thank you, Remason, for the $10 gift. How will climate change affect where people can live? I actually see progress happening on that front. Um, I see us heading in the direction of climate recovery. And I see that because I do see I think that's my logical conclusion based on a number of patterns that I've been shown about the future. Like I see us moving away from the petrodollar, away from oil. Like we're going to move away from oil in part because of what's happening now. It's going to force us to go green, right? It's going to push us, it's going to accelerate green energy. This realization that's happening right now that a lot of countries are realizing how dependent they are on that region and who controls it, and how easy it is for whole countries to lose their entire power grid. And so many industries are dependent on energy. And so people are recognizing in a way that they should have recognized 10 years ago that, hey, we can't continue to depend on oil. So I see an acceleration of green energy happening very quickly. A movement away from gas and oil. And so that's going to really help the climate a lot. We're going to move away from, so we're going to have a lot less pollution and a lot less mining and destruction of the ocean through offshore drilling, right? There's a lot of things there's a lot of ways that the earth is going to benefit from us moving away from oil. And you see that it had to take this kind of crisis. That's how dumb we are. That's how hard-headed we are. And I think until this crisis happened, a lot of us thought, how are we ever going to convince the overlords to give up oil, right? How are we ever going to? It's too profitable, right? And now something happened, right? Head clown, he's like a trickster, right? He's doing all these terrible things, but some of them are going to work out for us, right? Because those terrible things, sometimes what the role of the trickster is to educate people, not because they're necessarily trying to educate us, but the consequences of their actions educates us. And so I do see us entering into climate recovery because of that. Also because of the shift in global power. I also see these data centers and AI companies being hard hit by what's going on right now. Not just over there, but also the domino effect of what's going to happen with supply chain stuff. But also the people are rising up against the data centers. And it's already happening in the US. We've had lots of, movements against the building of them. And it's just going to keep growing, this movement against these data centers, which are threatening our water supply, among other things. And so first, I just wanted to start by saying that I see us moving in the direction of climate recovery. Also, a third thing that's going to impact climate recovery is the star beings, because when they come, they're going to make us aware of free energy. So free energy already exists, but it's been suppressed. When they come, that information is going to be more widely shared. And so, but I'll tune in right now to your question anyway, even though everything I've gotten so far suggests that this isn't something that's yeah. So short term, yeah, because I'm always looking at the long view, because that's how I get information. I tend to get information on the big picture and the long view. So in the short term, yeah, there's a lot of storms. There's a lot of impact of climate change in the short term, in terms of a lot of extreme weather, droughts, and flooding. And I'm just seeing like hurricanes and tornadoes, like just a lot of, things being destroyed, tsunamis. I don't see it as like wiping out whole regions, though, which I feel like your question is about, like, are certain regions going to have to be abandoned because they're not habitable. So when I try to tune into that question, like Edgar Casey predicted years ago, he was a famous medical intuitive who predicted that there were going to be so much climate change that certain parts of the US were going to be uninhabitable. And the timeline for when he said that would happen has come and gone, and it didn't happen. But of course, we are seeing extreme weather. So I'm not seeing that, and it could just be that I'm not privy to that information, and I might not be privy to it because it's not really in alignment with my purpose. Like, I don't really predict catastrophe. That's something I don't do. It's not really, what I was sent here for. So it could be that's why I can't access that type of information of like regions that will become uninhabitable, because that's a kind of calamity news, which I'm probably not allowed to share. But my overall vision of climate change is that we are heading in the right direction, that we are actually entering soon a period of climate recovery. Um, oh, this was the question that I couldn't remember. So last week, someone asked me about the scientists, and I gave an answer, and I don't remember it now. So you got to go back and watch my live from last week because I can't remember it. But I did answer that question about why the science. It did have to do something with technology, energy. Did it? Someone put in the comments if you remember what I said last week. Yeah, this is true too, Froxy Roxy. We could have had electric vehicles in the 50s. The gas companies blocked them. Yeah, so like, the petro corporations have stopped a lot of things. Oh, this is interesting. Barbara Bowen said that Canada wanted to adopt Minnesota to save them from the frozen water. I didn't know that. That's wonderful. Thank you, Sister Canada. Yeah, Heyoka, kind of. Heyoka is like a backwards clown, a Native American trickster figure who does everything backwards. And sometimes the effect of that is to get you to kind of question the way you do things. And so, yeah, maybe we can think of him. I called him a skinwalker. um, this is funny. George Carlin said they joked many years ago that America is an oil company with an army. Oh, here's a question I missed. MJB and Hawaii were kind of out here. I don't know what this is in reference to. Thank you for the gift. I don't know what your question is exactly. What about Hawaii? I know you guys have been dealing with extreme weather, and it hasn't been covered in the news. Here's the thing about Hawaii is that it has really a lot of the indigenous people in the Pacific Islands have a lot of really powerful, very ancient wisdom. And so I'm not worried about them, because what's going to happen over time is that the indigenous wisdom keepers of that land, not just Hawaii, but like Tahiti and Borneo and I'm forgetting the names, Bora Bora, like there's a number of places, are gonna return to the indigenous ways. And there's wisdom in those indigenous ways that have to do with climate. So I'm not familiar with it, but I'm going to give a comparison to what I do know, that I'm kind of hearing as I'm tuning into Hawaii. So the Seminole people. So I'm Seminole. The Seminole are in Florida, and there's a lot of hurricanes in Florida. But the hurricanes never hit the Seminole or Miccosukee people. Like the indigenous people of Florida never get hit. There's been a lot of hurricanes that have damaged a lot of places in Florida. Never hits the Seminole. Why? Because there is indigenous wisdom about how to avert a hurricane, how to protect your community from weather. It's very ancient knowledge. And they have something like that over there in Hawaii. They have some ancient knowledge. Now, the indigenous people have been really severely oppressed over there, and the land's been taken over by the foreigners, the haoles, right? And there's been just a lot of repression of indigenous sovereignty. And that has to change, right? So that's going to have to change so that wisdom can then become kind of the law of the land. And that needs to happen in a lot of places, right? Indigenous people in Africa, in Asia, in the Americas, in the Pacific Islands, in Australia, in New Zealand, like these traditions need to be respected and given their place, because indigenous people have knowledge about weather and land and sustainability that other people don't. Non-indigenous people just don't have that wisdom. And so going forward, one of the ways that we're going to, the best way to handle climate recovery is to, you know, return indigenous people to the place of sovereignty where they belong and listen to them. That's what needs to happen. And I do feel like it's going to happen in Hawaii. It's going to happen in different speeds in different places. Some people are going to be more resistant to that, and other places will be less resistant. And I feel like it may have to do with extremes. Like in Hawaii right now, because they're dealing with extreme weather, I don't know if it's right now or in the past. I don't know exactly what's going on, but they've had extreme weather. Japan's having a lot of extreme weather. Japan has an indigenous group called the Ainu, severely suppressed, repressed, oppressed as well. These places that are having really extreme weather are going to be the first ones to embrace indigenous ways out of desperation. It's unfortunate, really, that some of us are so hard-headed that we're unwilling to recognize when we're doing things incorrectly until things get really out of control, right? That's what's happening to us as a country, the United States. We've been doing things incorrectly for quite a while. A lot of people have been suffering for quite a while, but there are a whole lot of people who weren't suffering and who were not willing to examine anything until it affected them. That's unfortunate reality. And so what I'm seeing is that the parts of the world that are having the most extreme weather crises are the ones that are going to embrace indigenous strategies first, out of desperation, out of a realization that, okay, we don't know what to do. Let's ask the indigenous folk. Let's give them their land back. Let's stop oppressing them. Let's let them have their own schools, and then maybe they can help lead us out of this situation, right? So that's what I see. And so I don't know if that answered your question about Hawaii, because I don't know exactly what your question was, but hopefully that was your question and I answered it. So I want to thank everybody for coming to my live, and thank you for the gifts. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the community. Thank you for watching my videos and keeping the faith, staying hopeful, forming community, sharing your ideas in the chat and in the comments. I appreciate all of it. I appreciate all of you. And thank you to everyone who's bought my books. Thank you to those people who have enrolled in my courses. I appreciate all of you. And so until next Thursday, or until you see me in my, see you in the comments in my videos, I'll see you then. Take care.